Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nonprofits. Today we're going to Texas, where the Ten Commandments have made their ways into public schools. Damien has more. Damien?
I do indeed, thank you. In an article from KHOU 11 by Ann James on June the 21st, 2025, comes news that Texas Governor Greg Abbott has signed Senate Bill 10 into law after it passed the Senate 21 to 10 and the House 82 to 46. For those who may not know, Senate Bill 10 is Texas's version of the controversial laws that have already been passed by Louisiana and Arkansas legislatures requiring classrooms in all schools in the state to either display a 16 by 20 inch poster of the Ten Commandments in classrooms or to accept donations of posters of the Ten Commandments. However, the ACLU has already stated that they will issue a legal challenge to Senate Bill 10. Let's go over to the panel for some discussion.
Awesome. Thanks, Damien. So I actually remember talking about this on an episode with some other nonprofits a few weeks ago, Kelly and AJ, right after it passed in the state house. We were really hopeful. There was a representative in Texas named James Tellerico that was kind of fighting against this, which we were really impressed by because as a Christian Democrat, he was fighting for the in favor of a separation of church and state, which of course at the ACA we align with that. Now, that being said, Damien, the article clued us in on some of the stated motives for the bill, particularly by Representative Noble, that it's foundational to our history and to education. Are you convinced by that, or do you think it's more likely that they're just kind of following suit?
I'm not convinced by Representative Noble in the least. So just to clarify, Representative Candy Noble is quoted in the article as saying, "Nothing is more deeply rooted in the fabric of our American tradition of education than the Ten Commandments. The very way we treat others as a society comes from the principles of the Ten Commandments. In these days of courtroom mayhem, it's time to return to the truth, to the fabric of our educational system. Respect authority, respect others, and don't steal. Tell the truth, don't kill, keep your word." And I find those very ironic things for a politician to be saying. Myself. But no, I'm not convinced of the educational value of putting the Ten Commandments up in a poster in classroom. I think if Texas and these other states that want to claim putting the Ten Commandments up as an educational benefit, what they really should be doing is focusing on school infrastructure, teachers' salaries, teaching conditions, enforcing standards in education to make sure that when the children leave the education system, have they been educated or have they been indoctrinated? I think that's the big question that people need to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good way to put it. I definitely agree. You mentioned like the concepts she named, like the don't steal, the be kind, respect authority, things like that. Those don't have anything to do with educating or being educated.
Exactly.
And they're not, they weren't even novel to the Ten Commandments. Like the things that were novel, that are unique to the Ten Commandments are the things that are about that religion. So, and there's only two religions, only two religions in the world that follow those. So, but Jonathan, coming to you now, do you think that taking steps like this in public education and saying yes, this is something that will be included in our public schools, is that something that could be seen as an extension of states' rights, that they can claim the authority to do that, or is it just problematic?
It's just problematic. The problem, of course, is obvious to us, but when people are zealots in their particular religion, no, it doesn't matter what religion it is, they have the feeling that everybody should be like them. And we should make sure that everybody's like them so that we can be comfortable in our own skins. But the problem with that is that not everybody is like you. There are other religions involved. Then there are quite a few people who are not religious at all and really don't want to hear your bullshit. And that's exactly what it is. It's a bunch of bollocks, as a friend of mine says. And if you're going to teach religion, don't claim it's historical. I mean, and don't claim it's part of Americana. Any rational historian who takes a passing glance at the foundation of this country will show you one of the key foundational elements was the separation of church and state. These people had just immigrated from Europe, which has been war-torn with religious wars for 1,000 years. Okay. They were sick and tired of people killing each other over differences in their belief structure. Okay. So at this point, they came over here and said, we're not going to have that. No religion in government, period. That's what the history says. These people want to make it differently because they don't feel comfortable. They like being the victims. They like, you're repressing our religion. No, you're trying to proselytize. That's against the rules. Intolerance is not tolerable in a tolerant society. So it's like, that just drives me nuts. But, I just think that the culture wars is all a bunch of bullshit, that they need to come off of.
So you mentioned the persecution complex, but like this is kind of a dub for Christians, right? Because they've seemed to have circumvented the separation of church and state. We may not officially have a national religion, but you can imagine this might be what it would look like if we did. So do you think the persecution complex will finally end?
No. They're going to figure out a way to play the victim every time they turn around. And it's just not the persecution complex. It's that the people who don't want their kids indoctrinated into Christianity are going to have to homeschool their kids. Yeah. And that is a big investment. One of the parents is going to have to be home all the time. There's not going to be double income, to pay the astronomical bills that are already high, but are going to go higher in the next 6 months. So 3 months probably. But you have to understand that people don't have the ability to do that. So they do get a W for that because they're still going to be able to put their religion in front of young minds who aren't fully developed yet and don't have the critical thinking skills. Some of them do. I know a couple of them, but most don't. In order to be able to sort that out and say, yeah, this is crap, and this part of it's good, and this part of it's almost crap. They know how to. When they start learning how to think, that's when they start getting indoctrinated.
Yeah.
Because if you do it too late, once they're in high school and their brain is almost put together, it doesn't do it completely till age 25, but it's still plastic enough to where if you wait much longer than that, and they've already formed whatever they're going to be at that point. So, and that just drives me crazy, that we're basically abusing children by forcing religion in the classroom. That's abusing everybody's child who isn't that particular brand of Christian. They're using a Bible that none of the Catholics believe is true.
Yeah.
Catholicism is the largest denomination of Christianity in the United States.
True.
And so, they're thumbing their nose at the Catholics. They're thumbing their nose at the Mormons. They're thumbing their nose at the Jehovah's Witnesses, which, of course, I don't mind them doing that, but I think it would be better done if they just tried to, at least be nice to people, okay. But I guess being nice is not a Christian thing anymore. But I'm going to stop ranting right now. So.
No, totally fair. Yeah, let it all out. But Damien, you and I found a little bit of irony in the same quote from Noble about mayhem. Do you want to expand on that?
Oh, look, there was a quote from, I think I did mention it before, where Representative Noble said, in this time of in these days of courtroom mayhem,
Yeah.
and it's just interesting how the number one Republican in the land, Donald Trump, is part of the reason for the courtroom mayhem. In that, you know, he's trying to push all these pieces of legislation and executive orders through, and he keeps on getting blocked by the court, and then the Supreme Court comes and like bails him out. And it's just interesting how, you know, the GOP are going, oh, look, these days of courtroom mayhem that my party is fueling. It's just
responsible for. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah,
but actually, I was going to say, Jonathan made an interesting point about parents homeschooling their children, because it's also a fact that lots of Christians homeschool their children because they don't want to be indoctrinated. They don't want their children to be indoctrinated by secular education.
By evolutionists.
By evolutionists.
Yeah. It is getting more common. Definitely. I have family members who I guess not so much anymore, at least for the first couple of years for one of their children, they were homeschooling. But yeah, it's becoming more common, but it is those pressures and those, I guess, difficulties that it comes with that you mentioned, Jonathan, that it just makes it, while more popular, less and less viable as time goes on. So yeah, I agree. Like, yeah, there is mayhem, but like, who has the ability to stop that? Who
the Supreme Court? Exactly.
Like, there's, you know, you guys are.
But they're knee deep in it, so it's like, you know.
Right. Exactly. So I mean, and we mentioned before, the thing that I think is that stands out the most to me is that once you ask them to justify the claim that, oh, this is foundational to our history and to education, and I was like, okay, like in what way? And then she lists, you know, these virtues, the what do we say? Don't steal, don't murder, don't lie. I mentioned the Sumerians earlier. The Code of Ur-Nammu, sorry, was written in the 3rd millennium, which is like it was 2100 BC. Yeah, sorry, yeah, 3rd millennium BC, which is 1100 years, before the earliest writings we have in biblical Hebrew. So like these are concepts that predate Christianity, predate Judaism. They don't come from Christianity. So you could just as easily say again.
I said, we are social animals, and being nice to people and not murdering them, and that is, when we were on the savannas of Africa, probably as Australopithecines, we had that because we're great apes, and we're social animals, and we don't do that to our own people. Now, we were clannish, we might do it to the guys down the block, but we're definitely but not to our own company. Yeah, right. We have our in-groups.
The guy that's going around harming everybody else might harm you, and you don't want to be harmed, so you get rid of them. So yeah, we have not only are there, you know, secular foundations for these, but non-10 commandment foundations for these principles. So you could just as easily give the same educational and historical value with the Code of Hammurabi as you could with the 10 commandments, if not more, because it's even older. It's more foundational. If Levitical law, Deuteronomical, I don't know if that's a word, is based on codes that came before it, like the Code of Hammurabi, then you could argue that it's more foundational than 10 commandments. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Oh, look, the 10 Commandments, well, firstly, the ironic thing here is that the version of the 10 Commandments that Governor Abbott wants to put in schools, firstly, is the King James Version, which is like ye old English. I'm literally reading from it now, and like it says, the text must read as follows: the 10 Commandments. I'm the Lord thy God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make thyself any graven images. Like if they're trying to put this in for an educational content, wouldn't it be easier to like put it in plain English rather than King James King James
Right.
English? I
Well,
look at,
now this literature-wise. Now let me make a point here. Literature-wise, if they read this, when they get to the Bard, to Shakespeare, they'll be
all right.
right there with it.
That's exactly what I thought. If it's in like a lit class, then we might have
Yep.
an argument to be had.
Intro to Shakespeare. You read a couple of Psalms out of the Bible.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, maybe not like a whole one. Don't make them read a whole one.
Oh, no, they're pretty boring. Yeah.
I
do find it.
Section. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I do find it somewhat interesting, though, that Representative Noble, who seems to be the one that's really pushing the public case for this, is saying, respect authority, respect others, don't tell the truth, don't kill. Yet Texas is one of the few states in America that still has the death penalty. I mean, like that to me is just like, guys, do you not see the hypocrisy? Do you not,
Oh yeah, it's
okay if the state does it.
Yeah. Exactly. Now, if I can add an update to the case, KHOU 11 put out another article, I think yesterday, saying that 16 families have actually filed a federal lawsuit against several school districts across the state to block the new law.
Amazing. But and actually I remember now from the last time I talked about this, there was a section of the bill, and I don't know if it was amended. Well, no, because I think it had already passed the House when we talked about it. So as it was delivered to the governor, there is a section that requires the state attorney general to act in defense of any school district that becomes the target of a lawsuit. And the state is responsible for paying if that district loses that case, the state is responsible for paying those fees. So any loss, well, but then it comes from taxpayer money. So that's I actually disagree.
It's going to come from taxpayer money either way.
So Section G, the Attorney General may settle or compromise any and all claims under this subsection. And if you look at Section F, notwithstanding any other law, a public elementary or secondary school is not exempt as well. So, so basically they're trying to railroad the law to open up this hole to put the 10 Commandments in, and then saying to the Governor General, the Attorney General, that you're on the hook for any lawsuit that comes from this. Yeah,
and so and it's just kind of like a vicious circle of God damn it, because these families are suing, which I think they absolutely should. But what will happen is, even if they do win those cases, it will be their tax dollars that are paying them back for having their rights violated. So it makes my skin crawl. Go ahead.
I have a question. Given that Louisiana and Arkansas already have this legislation in place, has it made any notable difference in the education standards of those states?
I'm not sure. I don't know if it has been in place long enough for there to have been measurements taken.
Okay. Louisiana law is already in the appellate courts from the challenges, so it's probably
I'm asking as a dead serious question. Like, I'm trying to be as impartial as I can to the people that might support this.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm just laughing at the situation.
Exactly.
To me, it's humorous, but yeah.
I'm just wondering, has anyone actually gone out and done the studies, like the research, collected the data to go, look, I think we really should put the 10 Commandments into schools because there is educational benefit in doing so.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if there's been any data gathered on it, honestly. That's a good question.
Okay.
I think in the Louisiana case, there was a bunch of, not studies, but there was a bunch of at least statements about that as far as what would be gained or not gained. I think they had some expert witnesses and that sort of thing. I don't remember a lot about it, so I'm not going to say that it's absolute or it's that I really know what I'm talking about, because I obviously don't. But, that it's just that I think they did. In those lawsuits, they were saying that it's educational, and the judge didn't buy it. They presented all their, this is educational evidence, and the judge said, nope, it's not.
Yep.
And that's why it went to the next higher court. When it finally gets up to the Supreme Court, they'll make a decision, probably the wrong one. So,
Possibly, and this actually highlights something else I noted in the article, was that, so the original article puts this line in, but supporters are banking on the current conservative-leaning Supreme Court to overturn that precedent. They argue the Ten Commandments serve a historical rather than religious purpose in school. And so the fact that supporters are counting on a GOP-stacked court to help defend against this legal, an upcoming legal challenge, says two things. That the law itself is so prima facie unconstitutional that it's inevitable it will land at the Supreme Court. And two, that people see the court as partial to their way of thinking, meaning that the court is not impartial.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Which,
so
yeah, huge red flag right there. In and of itself is a problem.
Like, regardless of which
and
side
that's just it with the last 4 months of decisions by the Supreme Court in this session. The decisions they came out with were absolutely unconstitutional. They ceased caring about the Constitution at this point. So, at that point, we lost our democracy, and so we're no longer a democratic republic.
I think it's a good argument for term limits.
Yep.
Agreed.
There you go.
That would be on all sides.
The original 1700 liberal position on that, I think it was Madison, but I can't remember. It might have been Jefferson. Could have been Adams, for that matter. They were all juxtaposed to each other. But I think it was that you can't have judges not have a lifetime appointment, because then it becomes a political position.
Well, but
they're subject to influence from the outside because they have their jobs to worry about. If they have to get reelected or they have to pass some sort of thing to get there, then that's not being self-contained as a judicial element. So, that was, I think, the rationale for that. However, in the modern day, when we're living so long,
modern day,
yeah.
Where this means that actually there'll be more than 2 or 3 presidents before you kick the bucket.
150 years ago, a lifetime term was like another 12 years, maybe.
Yeah. 12 to 20 years. Yeah. Somebody who was, like 20 when you got appointed was only going to be like 40 when you passed out,
I'm actually reading the text of the bill, and there is nothing in the bill about improving education. The bill is literally just to force schools to put a 16 by 20 inch durable poster or framed copy in classrooms. And as we were joking before,
has he never been in a kindergarten class? Durable? How do you make a durable poster that will last?
That's subjective.
Through 5-year-olds.
As we were joking before the recording, we're talking about putting it on the ceiling. That way, it won't be in the way of anyone.
Don't let it within hand's reach of any of those kids. Boy, they'll have a field day with that.
Well, the law doesn't say where it has to be put; it just has to be visible.
Yeah, it just has to be visible from anywhere in the classroom.
And it doesn't say you can't have rude images on the paper around the poster as well.
It has minimum specifications. It doesn't have maximum specifications.
Oh, there you go. That's
yeah.
But
you made a good point in that there's nothing else about education in the bill. It's just about this. And so it's really clearly like, okay, some people want to do this, so we're going to make everybody have to do it so that the people who want to do it are now allowed to do it. And like, they won't get in trouble for it. We'll basically just change the law and then they'll have to stop doing it again, but they'll be fine.
And we're going to make a completely BS reason for doing it as well.
That we can't back up more than just repeating it.
And look, in all fairness, like if you want to go to a religious school where, a school that is run by people who believe in Judeo-Christian religion, sure, that's okay. Send your children to those schools.
Yeah.
And you can, have them in a Christian focused education as much as you want. Like we have private schools here. that are run by either Lutheran Church or the Catholic Church or Anglican Church, whoever. That's fine. But I think when it comes to publicly funded education, like, guys, just chill.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta, it has to be for the public at large. And
inclusive. I know that's a bad word nowadays, but it has to be inclusive of the other religions as well.
Don't be so woke, Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan. You
I have a T-shirt on that. It says "woke as fuck." So that's my T-shirt. So I guess I can be that way if I want.
Fantastic. Well, for our public at large, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? Get in the comments, share, like, and subscribe, and click below for more nonprofits. And we'll see you on Friday.